So
no,
there's
I
clear.
haven't got a wristband yet, and I don't know just sort of how epoch-making that will be, but we'll find out, I guess. Once we've got the wristband, we can carry on, I think.
Do you have yet an indication of how long in total much time you're going to spend before you get...
I'm confused by that, you see, because people say, oh, it's 11 hours, and you go, does that mean from the park, or does that mean from when you got your wristband? So I'm not sure.
Right.
So I would say another couple of hours, maybe hour and a half here, and then we're off.
And then what is it from the park to the Westminster Hall? Do you know?
Well, you probably know better than me, but
you're there. You haven't really done your due diligence, Ian Payne.
I can't tell because I ask stewards and they basically have no idea.
Oh, really?
And then you ask people around you and they have no idea. So I look on my phone and it says 10 hours, but where's that from? It's all a bit vague.
It is, yes. Well, good luck to you. I'll check in with you again just before handing over to Sheila Fogarty. I've already had one complaint from Marianne for not checking in with you at 11:43, as I apparently said I would, and doing it instead after the 11:45 break. You can't please all of the people all of the time, Payne, can you?
I'm not going anywhere.
Have you got snacks? Here, you know me. Have you got snacks?
I've just finished off a triple sandwich pack.
Which one was it? The BLT prawn?
No, it was a chicken triple.
3 different chickens?
2 different chickens.
You're not messing about, are you, Payne, today?
No, and I've got the peanuts ready.
You heard it here first. 11:51, Ian Payne, live from Southwark Park with a recently demolished triple chicken sandwich pack. Heth's in Cardiff. I'm glad that happened, because presumably you're going to bring Welsh issues to the fore, Heth.
That was the idea, yes.
Good man. Carry on.
Well, I'm in a different part of the town that King Charles is in, so I haven't bumped into his entourage today.
No.
But yeah, I'm in favour of Welsh independence, as are increasingly more and more people in the country.
Yes.
But I'm quite ambivalent or agnostic about monarchy and republicanism, and I tend to take. I think it's Stephen Fry who said, "Can you imagine how depressing and desperate an election for a British president would be, and divisive?"
It's a kind of better the devil you know position that you
exactly. I would much prefer to be in an independent Wales that has retained the House of Windsor as its head of state than a Republican Britain. But I don't see the two things, unionism and monarchism, as linked as the British state wants you to think. On a 2x2 matrix, you can be a unionist and a Republican, a unionist and a monarchist.
Do you mean many? Would we encounter many unionist Republicans? Do you think? I mean, I completely acknowledge their existence, or at least the possibility of their existence. But
I think all over the country,
all over Wales, but less so in Scotland and Northern Ireland, I imagine.
No, I think in Wales there are plenty of people who want to remain British and who are in favour of a republic. I think. One of the reasons why they're conflated even in Wales is that if you're willing to imagine a future that's as different as one where Wales or Scotland are independent countries, then I suppose you're more willing to imagine other big differences, and you're prepared to think of a world or a country where you have a president instead of a king or queen. So maybe that's why more people who are in favour of independence are Republicans than monarchists. But I don't see the two as inextricably linked. When I see, for example, pictures on the Mall during the Queen's Jubilee celebration, it's all full of Union flags.
Yes, it is.
Why isn't it full of the Royal Standard or indeed her personal insignia?
Yes,
I would be happy to. Celebrate her 70 years of service and dedication. But I'm not happy to celebrate the union that I don't think should exist. And why are people like me forced to see the two as one and the same when they don't have to be? She's the head of state of...
well, you're not forced to. You're clearly not forced to.
During those celebrations.
No, but you're not forced to, because you don't. So you are encouraged to. And I know I'm being a bit pedantic or semantic, but you're not forced to, because it's not something that's happened. You haven't ended up seeing them as the same. So you haven't been forced to see them as the same. Do you see what I mean? But clearly, it's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence that the flags you see on these occasions are. I mean, you might see a flag of St. George, but the massive preponderance of flags will be Union flags. Which
yes, but the implication is that we are celebrating the United Kingdom.
You're right.
On her jubilee,
yes.
rather than we are celebrating the institution of the monarchy or her personal, her years of service. Those are three separate things.
Yes, they are. A word on the new Prince of Wales. How politically significant is that, do you think? Because there is a danger of fracture. Possibility. Danger is a value judgment.
I mean, we're yet to see whether there'll be a formal investiture or not. I was surprised at how casually it was handed over, because it doesn't have to. It's not an automatic thing like the Duke of Cornwall is, for example, the Dukedom of Cornwall. I think you'll see, it's not the main topic of conversation at the moment because of other things. But if there's going to be an investiture, I think that will be the time when that debate comes to the fore.
Really kicks in again. There was an investiture for Prince Charles, wasn't there?
There was in Carnarvon Castle, yes. And there was a lot of tension around that and bomb threats and all sorts of things. Yeah,
there was. It's going to be an interesting period, and it is very much the case that the focus, I think, is going to grow on some of these issues, on independence, and not just clearly in Scotland. Thank you, Heth. You mentioned Carmarthen. Jeff is there, from Heth to Jeff. Jeff, what would you like to say?
Hi, James, and it's Happy Owen Glyndŵr Day today in Wales.
Is it today? I should have known that. I should have known that.
Yeah. And so a lot of the people at the castle today will be there celebrating with their own Glyndŵr flags and things. So it's another celebration. And I do think there is one difference between Wales and Scotland is, firstly, Scotland decided to join the Union with England, whereas the relationship between England and Wales has always been one of battles.
Yes.
And it goes back a long time. And as I understand, I'm originally from England, but I married someone who's down in Wales, is Welsh-speaking. And it's the actual Prince of Wales title itself, because it was Edward I who kidnapped and killed the Prince of Wales, Prince Dyfed, murdered him, and he gave all the titles and lands to his son, the Black Prince, as an insult to the Welsh.
Okay.
And this long-held insult, as they see it, the Prince of Wales title, has been given from son to son as an insult to Cymru. So they see that as an insult in itself, but also it ties into this long-held debate about principality and country. And obviously the people of Wales know that their country is officially been recognised as a country, but it's often used by, as we see it, by English nationalists as well. Wales is just a principality. What do they mean?
Well, you're speaking. I'm just going to caution you to not speak for the whole nation of Wales. Because
I speak for I'm.
I know, but you just can't. No, I know that, but someone tuning in for the first time to this conversation, not knowing anything about the history of the United Kingdom, would think from what you're saying that the independence movement in Wales was much stronger than it is in Scotland, and it of course simply isn't.
It isn't, but it's a growing one.
Yes, I know it is.
I think the last thing is about 30% of people in Wales want it. Welsh language is the strongest growing language in Europe. It's very much a growing thing. And I think Adam Price recently he was concerned about the announcement of William as Prince of Wales, saying really that there should have been more time and more thought given to that announcement than at this particular time on the Queen's death. So, there is concern here. I think Mark Drayford has voiced some stuff, because I caught that in the Welsh, about how that's happened. So, yes, I can't speak for everybody in Wales. There's lots of different opinions, but there is a growing movement for independence, and I think that one is more economic than historic.
And one of the things I've learned since I started doing this job and speaking to people who know more about these issues than I do is, of course, that part of the reason why the Welsh move for independence is not as vocal as the Scottish move is because of the efforts put in by the British government to almost denuding Wales of its Welshness by outlawing the language and by forcing...
It was the Welsh not, absolutely. They actually thrashed children who spoke Welsh. And for my... I knew my partner's father, he died a few years ago, but he was in living memory of that. that.
Yes, I know.
So
I know. I think Drakeford told me about some of this during his interview on Full Disclosure a few months ago.
Can I ask you, James,
quickly,
if you get a chance for your podcast,
yes,
there's a guy called Michael Sheen who can tell you a lot more.
A guy called Michael Sheen. A guy called Michael Sheen. I would love to have Michael Sheen on my podcast. In fact, he came in once. He came in once for something else. I think he was with Steve Allen, and I completely forgot to try and pin him down. But he's such a superstar that unless they follow me on Twitter, and I don't think he does, so I can DM a blue tick. That's how we got John Cleese on Full Disclosure. But if you have to go through the layers of publicists and assistants and agents, it's so difficult to do. But I love Michael Sheen. Michael Sheen, Jeff, is the reason why I gave up on my dreams to be an actor in my early 20s.
My partner was actually at National Theatre of Wales with Michael Sheen. So,
well, get her to have a word. Well. Get her, tell him. Get her to tell him that there's a seat on Full Disclosure waiting for him. In fact, speaking of Full Disclosure, today's episode features Emily Maitlis, who is, of course, my new colleague here as the presenter of the News Agents podcast and has been making news of her own in recent weeks. It's a lovely sit-down. I've known Emily for ages, since I worked at Newsnight, in fact, but there was an awful lot of stuff about her that I didn't know, so I'll play you a little bit of that shortly. The time now is 12:01. 12:05 is the time. Phil writes, during these discussions, James, I'm always reminded of the Divine Comedy song relating to the troubles in Northern Ireland. Who cares where national borders lie? Go the lyrics. Who cares whose laws you're governed by? Who cares what name you call a town? Who care when you're 6 feet beneath the ground? I love the Divine Comedy, Phil, like you do, and it's a beautiful song, that. Do you want to know some amazing me-related Divine Comedy trivia? I don't think you know this, Keith. Actually, I'm in a Divine Comedy video. Playing a journalist. Many people would say I still am. I wonder if you'll be able to find. I think I've told you before, but you can still recognise me. I am considerably younger than I am now, but I'm definitely spottable, to the point where I showed it to my kids and they spotted me. He's there. You can see me in an actual Divine Comedy video. If you're very good, I'll tell you which song it is before the end of the programme. Let's move this along now. As ever, feeling a little bit. What would the word be? Humbled by my lack of understanding of my own country. And when I say country, I mean the United Kingdom, my own kingdom, when we have conversations about Scotland or Wales. And I guess as a member of the Commonwealth, am I a member of the Commonwealth? Does the Commonwealth include the UK? I presume it does. Yeah, of course it does. What a stupid question. Otherwise we wouldn't be allowed to play in the Commonwealth Games. As a member of the Commonwealth, I think my ignorance is absolutely complete. So here is the question, really. Is the change in monarch going to threaten the Commonwealth? And you, as a member of a Commonwealth nation that is not the United Kingdom, will be able to answer that question. I feel increasingly, as we reflect upon her reign, that the Queen was a crucial part of almost keeping the future at bay. It's interesting, isn't it, when you have a link with the past. The Commonwealth, in many ways, of course, is the successor of the Empire, and the Empire remains a chapter in British history which becomes increasingly, the more we learn about it, the more we know about it, the more honest the teaching of what happened during the Empire becomes, the harder it becomes to cling to it as some sort of magnificent achievement. And Commonwealth is very much the child of Empire. At one point, it covered a quarter of the world's land surface, but of course, it subjugated millions of people for the benefit of relatively few. That's not an opinion. That's just counting. If you were one of the relatively few that it benefited, then obviously you've got a temptation to look at everything through very rose-tinted spectacles. But it was in 1926 that the Balfour Declaration created the British Commonwealth, stating that all the dominions, the former dominions, were autonomous communities, but they still had the UK's monarch as head of state. That's the crucial point about Commonwealth membership. You have government, you're entirely autonomous, you make all your own decisions, but the head of state is technically still the monarch. What will the change in monarch do to the Commonwealth? New Zealand, for example, paid tribute to the Queen, but talked about the monarchy. MPs in the New Zealand Parliament gathered to pay tribute to the Queen, But the honour and admiration was mixed with sharp criticism of a monarchy built on stolen land, stolen resources, and stolen treasure. A number of MPs adding to that narrative of what complaint sounds a bit petulant, but it is just critical history. Other politicians offered more straightforward tributes, including the Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern. Then, of course, you come to the West Indies, you come to Caribbean islands. So wherever you come from in the Commonwealth, as long as it's not the UK, I just want you to talk to me about whether or not you think the change in monarch is actually going to threaten the Commonwealth membership of your home country. And you can either do it from an overview perspective, as in talking generally about what you think the movement of traffic will look like, or, and I think I probably prefer this, you can do it from an entirely personal perspective. You can do it from, I'm from the West Indies, I'm from Jamaica, let's say, and the Queen is my head of state, and I was always pretty cool with that, but now it's not going to be the Queen anymore. I'm kind of questioning, that's what I want you to tell me, questioning the membership of Commonwealth, because the idea that your head of state is King Charles, in many cases on the other side of the world, is becoming increasingly hard to countenance. We talked about this for the first time ever during that royal visit to the Caribbean, wasn't it? When William and Kate misjudged everything so awfully, they ended up sort of dressing up like something out of the 1920s and parading around in an ancient Land Rover. And then there was another photograph of them sort of greeting children through a chain link fence, which had all manner of unpleasant connotations. It categorically wasn't their fault, except insofar as they could have said, "Whoa, let's not do this," or "This is an appalling photo opportunity. Let's not engage." But then I suppose in that case, the children on the other side of the fence would have been profoundly disappointed. So I have nothing but sympathy sometimes for public figures caught in these kind of scenarios. But I don't know. Apparently I've already made a mistake. The vast majority of Commonwealth countries do not have the Queen or the King as head of state. Only 14 of them do. So when I told you that my ignorance in this field was fairly spectacular, you'll be delighted to know I was not lying or exaggerating. But I just want to know what it's going to do. Particularly, I guess, because it's a part of the world from which so many British people have come to make their lives here, and we learned during the Windrush scandal how fragile that connection can be, particularly perhaps from the West Indies. But does the change in monarch threaten the Commonwealth? 03456060973. And of course, if like me you're not from a Commonwealth country outside the United Kingdom, you can join me in having a little bit of a think about it. I think it will. I think the Queen was so baked into our consciousness, largely because of 52% because of the nature of her reign, I think, and 48% because of its longevity. I think two things are most memorable about Queen Elizabeth. The first is the longevity of her reign, the 70 years, the fact that it is almost impossible to remember life without her. You'd have to be over 75 to remember life without the Queen, wherever you live in the world. And that, of course, means that the question of whether or not we should have a monarch, or whether or not you should have the monarch as the head of state in another Commonwealth country, has almost felt insulting to Her Majesty. Do you see what I mean? It's like, well, all right, I suppose logically that feels a bit anachronistic, or it feels a bit silly, but she seems lovely, and she's very committed, and she's done a great job, and she's been there for years. It just feels a bit rude to question whether or not she should be our head of state. I'm talking now about Commonwealth countries outside the United Kingdom. When Charles comes in, as Charles comes in as king, that longevity is no longer relevant. The second thing I think that defines Queen Elizabeth's reign in the context of this conversation is that notion of the camouflage of mystique, the fact that we knew nothing about her, the fact that she was as much a figurehead as a human being, the occasions upon which you could even guess at her opinion about something can be counted on two fingers. Over 70 years, that's quite incredible. And Charles is not like that. So you've got this combination, the two big transformations coming on are the fact that Charles is wet behind the ears as a monarch, the fact that he's box fresh, means that you perhaps are more likely to question the relevance and suitability of him being your head of state if you're Australian. And the second thing is that he's not mystical. He doesn't have the mystique, the camouflage of mystique that the Queen enjoyed, deliberately, that the Queen enjoyed and employed. He is much more obviously human than the Queen. And I mean that in a, flaws, warts and all sense, not in a David Icke kind of sense, not questioning her humanity. So you've seen Prince Charles already get angry with his fountain pen. That's already more of an insight into a lack of self-control, a shortage of self-control than you ever saw with the Queen. Can anyone ever remember seeing the Queen cross? Did you ever see the Queen cross? So that combination, the removal of the longevity, the resetting of the monarchical clock goes back to zero as Charles's reign begins, coupled with the fact that he is not a mystical figure. I need a slightly better word than mystical, but he is not a mystical figure. He is a very human man. We know a lot about him. We know more about him than we want to know in the case of some of the scandals that dogged him 20 or 30 years ago, which I'm not going to go into the detail about. But that, for me, makes the historical question of head of state of Commonwealth countries, or even membership of the Commonwealth, I think it becomes quite live. I don't think the Commonwealth is going to survive in its current form under King Charles. I don't see how it can, because these questions have been pushed into the background or silenced by respect for the Queen, respect for those two branches of her reign, the longevity of it and the nature of it. And neither of those two things are going to sustain. Prince Charles is clearly not going to have a reign as long as his mother's, and his personal nature is not the same as his mother's. So I think the Commonwealth, for good or for ill, and I suspect it's probably for good, although, as with all changes, sometimes progress can feel like a loss. I don't think the Commonwealth is likely to survive in its current form. If you're from a Commonwealth country outside the United Kingdom, I guess I'm especially interested in what you have to say. But if, like me, you are very much from within the United Kingdom, join me in thinking about this. That idea of why the Queen held it together. If she did hold it together, then it must be due to those twin attributes, longevity and nature, mystical nature, and Charles will have neither of those, which means he won't be able to hold it together. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need, and plenty of phone lines free on this one. Apologies if you were waiting to talk to me about Scotland or Wales. I'm wiping the board on those two parts of the United Kingdom, but opening it up to the entire Commonwealth. It's under serious threat, right? I mean, it has to be, I think. Tell me I'm wrong. 0345 6060 973. It's 12:17. It is 12:19, and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. And the question is obviously clear enough, because so many people have rung in to answer it, including several from Australia, and I can't say further afield than Australia. We'd be out of the solar system, wouldn't we? Or at least we'd be out of Earth's orbit. 20 minutes after 12. We'll start in Swindon, which is not as far away as Australia. I can say that with a degree of confidence, although, of course, it depends where you're listening. Joseph, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I think, good morning. Thanks for having me. Good afternoon, sorry. I think it is going to survive. I think the Commonwealth is going to survive, because I think the Commonwealth have addressed that problem before as to who will be the successor in the Queen. I think they elect Prince Charles to be the leader of the Commonwealth.
Yes, but that's just the council of electors, isn't it? It's not your average Joe in the street. Oh, I forgot you were actually called Joe when I said that.
All right. I think from the conversation I've been having with, people from my country,
yes,
from St. Lucia, I don't think that is being part of the Commonwealth. I don't think we see it as a problem. Most of these countries has a governor general, or we elect a prime minister. So being part of the Commonwealth, we don't see it as a problem. Whether or not we're going to elect to have like a presidential system, whether you want to be republic and still be part of the Commonwealth like India does. But I cannot see it threatening the Commonwealth itself, because I think the Commonwealth, they represent more than just they kicked
Do you not? So we have to choose our words carefully. I don't want to put words into your mouth, but you don't. I mean, it seems to me that the shift from the Queen to King Charles is significant in the context for those two reasons that I was banging on about 10 minutes ago. Because the reign was so long and her reign was so mythic. Emma suggests we should say mythic instead of mystical. It was imbued with so much history, and she seemed to have one foot so far in the past in ways that Charles doesn't. So asking about should she really still be our head of state felt personal. It won't feel personal with Charles, at least not for 10 years.
Yes, but then if you go back to it, the representative, so the representative in my country is the Governor General. It's not elected by he's not elected by the Queen. It's elected by the government of Grenada. So they will elect who will be the Governor General in the Senate and submit that to the Queen. So if King Charles is not going to elect our Governor General. We have that. We will still. But
he'll still be your head of state, though.
He will still be, and I don't think we have a problem with that because all our institution is linked to it. We still have the Royal Grenada Police Force and stuff like that. So most of our institution is linked to it. But then, as I said, I don't see it threatening the Commonwealth as per se because the Commonwealth is more the members of the Commonwealth is therefore I think it's more for shared history. It's not to be a servant unto the crown, and if King Charles respect that and he's saying, okay, we are here because we have a shared history and we are all part in this together and we continue to share that history and we're moving forward. I don't see how that could be a problem, and I think once the mutual respect takes place and continue to take place between the monarchy and the Commonwealth,
yes.
I don't see a problem with that. I don't see a problem with countries saying, no, I don't want to be part of it.
No, I hear you. What about this line that a member of the New Zealand Parliament spoke when talking during tributes to the Queen, when they talked about a monarchy built on stolen land, stolen resources and stolen treasure? That's quite pertinent to the West Indies.
I have the same view. I have that same view as how I see the monarchy been in the past. I share that same view, that it was built on that. I have the same view. I have the same view. But I serve in the army. I serve in the British Armed Forces. But that doesn't, because it has changed. The view now, the way I see it now, and the way I see how the English or the Welsh to look at me is that we are all equal. When I serve in the British Army, I serve in the British Army as all equals. If he was a Welshman or a Scotsman or an Englishman, we're still equal, and that's what the Commonwealth represents to me.
I love that. I love that. Yeah. I mean, the Windrush scandal shook that confidence a bit, perhaps.
It did.
Yes,
it did, and it depends. As I said, it depends on how King Charles addressed that. It depends how King Charles make it relevant and saying, "Hey, we're here because we have a common goal, we have a common interest, and you're not here to serve. We are here as equal representative members, a group of people who share that history."
That's beautifully put, Joseph, actually. Really beautifully put. Thank you. 24 minutes after 12 is the time. Kenneth comes from a slightly different angle. Good afternoon, he says. It will break under Charles unless the issue of reparations is addressed. Secondly, if he addresses the issues with Harry and Meghan in an equitable fashion. And finally, free trade agreements and visa equity would be matters that could help keep us together. Thank you for your kind regards, Kenneth. That's, again, as with Joseph, an astute analysis, much better than mine. But those are the days I enjoy the most, when my callers know a lot more about a subject than I do. Can't do it every day, but on the days that we do it, I love it. Michael's in Sydney, Australia. Michael, what would you like to say?
G'day, James. How are you?
I'm pretty good, actually. What's on your mind?
Just a couple of points.
Yeah.
Firstly, to straight up say, I am a long-standing Australian Republican.
Sure.
Who just, obviously does not believe that the monarchy has a place within Australia's constitutional system. But I'm finding this process, like I always knew that the death of this major, historical and obviously constitutional figure for the United Kingdom and for Australia was going to have some pretty interesting consequences. But funnily enough, I don't think that, in my lifetime, and I'm 46, I don't think that this is going to be an impetus. It will not actually allow a change in my lifetime. So
you don't think there's
a Republican system?
Impetus, catalyst. It won't make a difference to the movement towards Republican?
No, because part of the problem with Australia is, and it's so if you would know our history a bit, I'm sure you know that in the late 1990s, Australia had a referendum on whether we should go to a republic, led by it was instituted by the John Howard Conservative Liberal government, and they played a very, very smart game of allowing the question to go to a referendum. It was an addendum to the actual general election question of which government to support. But they made it very tricky by positing different constitutional models that people had to pick on the ballot. Now you understand that for even constitutional experts to have a 3-ticker box, how are we going to structure the relations between House of Commons, a House of Lords? Is the House of Lords going to be a House of Review or amendment? What is the power of an elected president?
So you're describing the difference between, if you like, an emotional pull towards republicanism and the actual detail of introducing one being slightly at odds with each other.
Yeah, even though my fervent hope is that Charles is an impetus for us to move towards a republic, because I think that frankly the monarchy as an institution within your own country and as an institution with ours is infantile, and it's morally and ethically wrong, but there are very sophisticated forces of conservatism that will bamboozle people by trying to make it a question of asking ordinary people to decide on a ballot paper exactly the precise constitutional structure, which is not hard. It's too hard. It's too hard.
It's almost as if a really straightforward yes/no referendum about an incredibly complicated constitutional and indeed commercial and political issue is a bad idea, Michael, isn't it? Yeah. Thank God we've never done that here, eh?
Hey, look, I'm not going to get into that because you covered it beautifully. But could I also just add, a couple of other patinas for you from an Australian perspective? And I heard your lovely caller Kenneth before. I think the inertia of international structures will mean that the Commonwealth will continue for a long period of time forward. Just for instance, in 2003, the coalition of the willing, Australia, United Kingdom, and America, effectively dealt the blow that turned the United Nations into the League of Nations. I think it's hard to argue.
Five Eyes persists as well, doesn't it? With I think 3 or 4 of the members of that being essentially part of the same caucus. I like that word, inertia. I mean, it can be a good thing and a bad thing because, in a sense, it's a synonym for stability, isn't it? But in another sense, it's a synonym for lethargy. It's a really helpful way of looking at it, actually. I'm cracking on, Michael, only because I've got the news coming up. It's a pleasure to talk to you, and thank you for your insights. I wonder where the impetus for full independence, for republic status, is strongest in the Commonwealth. It's presumably it's in the Caribbean. I don't know that for sure, and I'm conscious of making a fool of myself by issuing any sweeping statement. So I am wondering, not stating, whether or not it would be in the West Indies that the impetus for Republican status is strongest. If you're from relevant island, give us a call. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. Amelia Cox is here now with your headlines. 12:33 is the time. A little bit of breaking news for you, and you may not be across the story or the issues, but it's touched upon some people I know and care about, so I'm going to share it with you. In fact, someone that I was with only last week, someone called Alex Belfield, an ex-BBC DJ, has just been jailed for 5 years for stalking Jeremy Vine and other stars in what has been described as a relentless hate campaign. 5 years and 26 weeks sentenced to jail at Nottingham Crown Court this morning after being labelled the Jimmy Savile of trolling during the trial in August. The longest part of that sentence are 2.5 years. 2 sentences, consecutive 2.5-year sentences of a BBC Radio Northampton presenter called Bernie Keith and a videographer called Ben Hughes. That the details. Ben, in particular, has tweeted a full account of, or close to a full account of what happened to him, and it's incredible, and it's a very significant story. I've been guilty over the years of looking at trolling, online trolling, through a fairly the word be. I was just finding it pathetic, but of course some of the stuff that's going on here is just absolutely awful. You have to probably recognise the seriousness of this kind of behaviour, so much so that this Belfield character is now facing 5.5 years in jail, and I think we'll probably talk a little bit about this next week at some point, because how many times have we talked about how the internet has become into existence in our lifetimes, but it is like the Wild West. The regulation follows the offences. So I would have sat here not that long ago laughing at people who try to troll me, and therefore almost diluting the significance and the seriousness of these sort of crimes. But, some people haven't got thick skin. Some people deal with trolling, in the case of Ben Hughes, that is almost impossible to believe. It's the commitment that this character has put into pursuing, harassing, stalking someone who has no particular connection with him. It's incredible, but it's now a prison sentence, a 5.5 year prison sentence for doing stuff on Twitter and YouTube and elsewhere. Time perhaps to stop filing trolls, or box of trolls, as we used to call them on this programme, under sort of misfits and weirdos, and recognising instead that they are often criminals and deeply sinister individuals. I wonder how you tell the difference. That might be something we can talk about next week. Because for the time being, we're talking about the Commonwealth and this sense of a threat to it from the change of monarch, although callers so far are rejecting my analysis that this is going to be significant. My analysis was built partly upon the fact that the New Zealand Parliament, as it gathered to pay tribute to the Queen, heard a lot of comments, a lot of criticism of monarchy itself, not least because it was built on, quote, stolen land, stolen resources and stolen treasure. And against that background, it seems to me that move towards full independence, or republican republic status, would gather pace, because the Queen acted as a sort of glue. It was Barbados, of course, while the Queen was still alive, that swore in its first president after 400 years of British rule. Barbados formally became a republic earlier this year, in February of this year, cutting all ties with Queen Elizabeth II and casting off the last major vestige of its colonial past. And when we talked about that, I got a sense that lots of other countries would follow. And that sense is being slightly chipped away at now by my callers. But, the plural of anecdote is not data. Peter is in Melbourne in Australia. Peter, what would you like to say?
Yeah, hi, James.
Hello.
I was probably around about 23 when the last referendum was held, and I really probably didn't pay much attention to it at all.
Yeah. But
I think in the last, since then, there has been probably a big shift in demographics in Australia. My great-grandparents, they were English. That generation has died off.
Yeah.
And they would have all voted for keeping the Queen. That's now changed. My generation, even my mum's generation, they were, they'd be more likely to vote for to lose the Queen as the head of state.
Do you know what do you know what the polling is at the moment? Do you know what do you have regular polls on it? Is it because in Scottish independence they're polling fairly regularly in Scottish media? Does Australian media carry regular pollings on Republican referendum results or not?
I've never had, and I get quite a few calls from doing polls for political things. I've never received.
No.
Yeah, I've never received any calls regarding Republican, whether we want to do another referendum, that sort of thing. So, and I think a lot of the young people these days, they're seeing the reports of, what's going on in England with, and the damage that, the British system has done in different countries, and they're realising, the same things happened in Australia, and I think they'll probably turn their backs on that.
And the change in monarch will have any impact on that or not? Because you're describing something that's happening anyway. The chap in Sydney a moment ago suggested that it isn't actually going to speed things up. It isn't actually going to be a catalyst. But what do you think? Because I'm feeling a bit silly now. I thought the change in monarch would have quite a profound effect on people because of that, if you like, that sense of loyalty to the Queen, stopping people from calling for a republic.
Look, my generation, I really don't think they care that much, you know.
How old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
Honestly, I'm 45.
Okay.
And I honestly don't think, you know, I don't honestly prefer William rather than Charles.
Okay.
And I think a lot of people, you know, my age would probably think the same thing.
Yeah, but but that, I mean, then it would be but you won't have William if you get rid of Charles.
No, I know, but yeah, you know, it's.
No, I get it. I get it.
Queen's been there, you know, my whole life. I remember in 1988 we changed from singing "God Save the Queen" to "Advance Australia Fair" at primary school.
Okay, that's interesting.
That's, you know.
And that's going to be part of it, isn't it? It's the soft power that is exerted on people. You're singing "God Save the Queen" in primary school, then you're going to arrive at adulthood, whether you know it or not, with a slightly different view of the world than you would if you'd been singing Australia Fair at primary school. I don't think we sing God Save the Queen ever at British schools, do we? I don't know. Sang Jerusalem a lot at my school. Thank you, Peter. The Northern Ireland census results have been delayed. A major release of census results has been delayed as a mark of respect to the Queen. I think we'll probably add that to the list of things that don't quite seem that respectful or don't seem to make that much sense. But there it is. I just mentioned that because Peter mentioned demographics. Let's go from Melbourne to Milton Keynes. Lloyd is there. Lloyd, what would you like to say?
James, hi, long time.
Welcome.
Just wanted to add my 2 cents to this. I think the Commonwealth is at risk for 3 different reasons. A, it's colonialism, the Act of Reparations, and the Harry and Meghan issue.
Right.
The Queen, people respected the Queen, and I think most of us were born, our parents, and there's a lot of respect from an African perspective.
Yes.
People just respected the Queen, but the question that you hear now in African circles more and more is, what does she do for us? What is she doing for us? And secondly, we do not separate the British, say, politics, the government, from the monarch. We just talk of the British in general. So when the so-called whoever goes and talk of Piccadilly smiles and watermelon smiles, we are looking at it and thinking, oh, really? Okay. When they talk of the Rwanda policy, we are sitting there and thinking, oh, really? So the picture is, you came to Africa, you've built, like the New Zealanders have said, you've built your wealth on the back of stolen land, stolen resources. Show me a gold mine in the UK. Show me a copper mine in the UK. We all know where these things came from. And now, all of a sudden, you've amassed all this stolen wealth, and we are the pariahs. You know, there's no apology, there's no reparations, there's no respect.
And yet the monarch is still the head of state in some of these countries.
In most African countries. In Zimbabwe, it's not because of the relationship with Robert Mugabe.
But isn't there a call for it to rejoin? Isn't there a movement for them to rejoin the Commonwealth, which kind of undermines some of your arguments?
Absolutely, but then this is the reason. This is the reason, because the government of the day wants to join, because, you know, they like coming in here and going to Buckingham Palace and drinking coffee and tea when their people are traveling back home.
They get a nice day out.
Exactly. If you remember very well, Robert Mugabe had a very good relationship with both the Queen and Prince Charles until his atrocities became too common.
Yes.
He was being invited to... The times that Robert Mugabe was being invited to Buckingham Palace, he was killing black people in Africa.
Yes. Yes, no, I mean, it's. I was about to say it's not black and white, but of course it is as well, isn't it? As you pointed out.
Yes.
Why Harry and Meghan? Why do we bring? I think I know, and I think it popped up a lot because it tells you something about the royal family that you don't like.
Because it's racism.
Yes,
Simple.
of course.
As far as we are concerned, she's being treated that way because she's a black woman. Simple and straightforward. And people who had were not very clear, now they realize that no wonder why we're not welcome in the UK, really. No wonder why they talk of foreigner this, foreigner that. Look at what they're doing to Meghan. If Harry, but at one point Harry was going out with the Zimbabwean girl, who he almost married, as far as we understand. There wasn't any problem, you know. She was white and father was very rich, Etonian or whatever, very rich and no problem. The moment Meghan came into the picture, so as black people, we realize that, you know what, we have our uses, maybe labour and
it's
stuff
a big
like
one.
that.
Yeah, but well, I mean, you know that people like you were banned from working at Buckingham Palace until well into the 1960s, I think, or possibly later. That isn't the case anymore. But it's impossible to look
But
at.
it was. And if you speak of Joe, I respect Joe in Swindon quite a lot.
Yes.
Joe talked about, but Joe, that's your view.
Yes.
I really would like to look at the institution. Did they view us as one? Do they view us as one? You might find that probably not.
Well, you can say that. I wouldn't have been appropriate for me to say that. I thought it was rather beautiful that Joseph talked of equality and feeling exactly as valued and as important and as equal as his comrades in arms from other backgrounds and from other ethnicities, but you were perfectly entitled to say that I don't, and you can point at the treatment of Meghan Markle and say the royal family don't either.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's a danger. I don't think it will survive. May take a while to disintegrate, but I don't think it will survive.
Yeah. Thank you, Lloyd. I enjoyed that a lot. I'm really enjoying this conversation, although I have to concentrate a little bit harder during the hours when we're talking about stuff I know considerably less than my callers about. And the last hour of the week, 12 till 1 on a Friday, is usually the hour when my concentration begins to wander. So thank you for keeping me on my toes today. 12:45 is the time. 12:49 is the time. Should we do Pain Watch? Should have got a jingle for this, Keith. Why haven't we got a jingle for Pain Watch? Well, largely because this will be the last one ever. Because if you're still there on Tuesday when I'm back at work, Ian Payne, then something's gone horribly wrong.
Yes, they've called it the Elizabeth line, Line of Duty, or QE2.
QE2. I like QE2. Are you still in QE2, or have you made QE1?
Not quite in. E2 is actually Bethnal Green, so we're thankfully not quite that far east. But this is the start. This is the end of the start, if that makes sense.
The end of the beginning.
Basically, this is where you can't go further back than Southwark Park. So I'm in Southwark Park. I'm 2/3 the way through.
But you've been in Southwark Park since I came on air this morning.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So when you came on air is when it all began.
Yes. Well, in so many ways, Ian. In so many ways.
So I'm nearly there. And then when I get to the end of the park, I get a wristband with a number on it. So it means I can dip out of the main queue when I want and then resume my place. It's a bit like waiting to have your shoes done in Clark's. That's a bit old, isn't it?
I would have hoped you would get your wristband before the end of the programme, actually. I thought we might get a little bit
When you finish 1 o'clock, not a chance.
It's not a chance. It's not going to happen, is it?
No, it's going to be Sheila, I'm afraid. She's going to have the blue ribbon and the baton.
Well, don't count your chickens, or indeed your chicken sandwiches. I hope so. I hope Sheila will be here shortly, and she may check in with you as well, although she may not. I don't know. I don't know. She might not care about you at all, Ian Payne.
What have I missed?
Not a lot. Stay safe, mate. Still, I know you probably haven't, but have you got any idea what time you'll be heading home this evening, or having paid your respects?
At the moment, it's looking like 10 p.m.
10 p.m, okay.
Yeah, but it might be later.
Okay, good luck. Stay safe.
All right, man. Thank you, bye.
Take care, cheers. Ian Payne there, live from Southwark Park, where he is not quite in the queue yet. That's a remarkable reflection of this whole story, isn't it? And he may well be checking in with Sheila as well later in the day. I have to check his signal, his power. I hope he's brought one of those chargers, those portable chargers with him. So at 10 o'clock this morning, I arrived in the studio and Ian Payne arrived in Southwark Park. In 9 minutes' time, I will be leaving the studio and Ian Payne will still be in Southwark Park, in the queue to join the queue. And as he suggested, there is in fact a queue to join the queue that now stretches as far back as Bethnal Green. That can't be right. He's making that up, wasn't he? Was it a figure of speech? He said, oh, it was an E2 joke. Of course it was. Yeah, so it was QE17. We'd be in Walthamstow. 12:51 is the time. Bit of an in-gag, that, I think, really. Nicola is in Biggleswade to steer us back to the Commonwealth conversation. Nicola, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi, James. My first time calling, so please be kind.
Of course I will. What are you expecting? What are you suggesting? Carry on.
So I'm third generation, I think it is. Third generation British Caribbean descendant. And I listened to some of your callers. I found it very interesting listening to Joe in particular.
Yes.
I disagree with him respectfully. With him. I do think there will be change, and I don't think it's necessarily just because the Queen is no longer reigning. Because Barbados made changes prior to while the Queen was alive.
Correct.
And I think, that that's just the start of a conversation that's going to happen more widely in the Caribbean. There are already, prior to Barbados, Trinidad is a republic, Guyana is a republic, and the younger generations that were not born as British citizens under the late monarch that passed away have serious questions that need to be answered about what purpose there is to their head of state being this foreign overseas in a country which has actively discouraged them coming there. It doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't, does it?
When they've seen people who they've never known returning back because they've been forced back, and they don't know these people who are suddenly arriving in their communities, having been expelled, frankly, from the United Kingdom, whose monarch is on their currency, it makes no sense to the younger people. It makes sense to people of my grandma's generation who came here with a blue passport, who loved the Queen, who used to make sure that we all stood to attention at Christmas to listen to the speech, you know, who named her first daughter Margaret Elizabeth. That generation is dying out, and the younger people don't understand what it's about. My husband frequently refers to the Commonwealth as the nations that are common and the wealth in the UK. there is absolutely no benefit to them at all from being in this community of nations. Britain has looked to Europe, and the Commonwealth nations that are close to the United States have a new imperial master. They look to the United States. And you see it in a lot of cultural, although this may sound trivial, you see it in a lot of cultural ways. They're no longer interested in cricket. They're much more interested in basketball.
Okay. That's interesting.
There are ties that are being severed all the time. And Priti Patel has made sure that those ties are broken forever. She doesn't want them here. She's let them know she doesn't want them here. She's repatriated people from here who don't even know the region. And, you know, there's nothing in it for them whatsoever. The United States has an open door policy for immigration from the Caribbean. So has Canada.
And we don't.
What's the point?
It's incredible, really. I didn't know that. I every day's a school day, but particularly, as I suggested at the outset, particularly on this issue for me. I mean, the way you describe it, it's absolutely inevitable. The only mystery is why it hasn't happened sooner. You've only got 30 seconds to answer this because I need to play a clip of this week's Full Disclosure. Does the changing of the monarch have any effect at all on the process you're describing? Does it have a catalyst? Does it act as a catalyst, or are we just seeing the momentum already building?
I think it speeds it up.
Okay, because you don't have the personal loyalty or fealty to the Queen, regardless of your generation or background. Thank you, Nicola. What a splendid collection of calls, and in that highly unlikely event that you can't bear to wait until Tuesday morning, when I'll be back on air Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock, then luckily there's a Full Disclosure that you could download and listen to over the course of the weekend. See if you can recognise the voice of this week's guest. Amidst all this freneticism, you found your calling. Did you? Was there a moment? Was there a period of clicking where you felt, crikey, I want to do this for the rest of my life?
There was a period of clunking.
You can't resist.
I was really... I wanted to go into journalism at that point. I wanted to do this and report and talk about it. I was really bad, though, James. I was really bad. And I didn't understand properly how it worked.
Are we back to the feelings you had at Cambridge now, then, or
no,
or a different flavour of insecurity? Or
I just genuinely, this is not insecurity.
Crapness.
Yeah, sincere crapness. So I went. They would send me on the. You mentioned Chris Patten, and I would go and they'd say, Chris Patten's about to open a shopping centre in Montauk. Why don't you go and go and follow him around. You're on the Chris Patten beat. And I'd come back and I'd file a piece that said, the shopping centre was glass and chrome and 120 metres tall and will be one of the... I'd just literally copy the press release. And they go, but what did Chris Patten say about the Human Rights Commission? And I'd say, what? And they'd be like, but you went to follow... I didn't understand how it worked. Right?
News. You could do the documentary stuff because that's storytelling, but you couldn't do the news stuff?
This was right at the beginning. This was radio
even
news.
Before
even
that.
before... Yeah, by the time I got to TV documentaries...
Why did they stick with you, do you think?
They didn't. I had a contract that was renewed every 3 weeks.
Right.
So that was quite unsettling, working from... And that's why I think I've always felt... That was my first contract was... you'll get this renewed every 3 weeks if you're good enough to last 3 weeks. So it's left it's left that sense with me that you're only ever as good as your last interview. You're only ever as good as your last show, because it could be taken away. So I've never felt that permanence. I don't think they really did stay with it. I think I just I probably just went and got the sound bites.
But you got better.
I did get better.
Could you feel yourself getting better?
I learnt, it was steep. The first thing I remember, my editor there saying, you don't have to start a news report with the word today. Okay. If it didn't happen today, Emily, it wouldn't be on the news.
Yes, it's a fair point.
It was, And so I sort of learnt, it's quite a male environment, quite sort of shouty and doer, but I did learn,
And can you hold your own in shouty male environment? Could you then?
I can now, yeah.
That's another steep curve, presumably.
Well, I think, what I would say is there's a difference between, if the men in the room, which at that point, they did know more than me. Yes. So actually my place was to listen and learn. I don't agree with the fact that everyone has to have a voice if you know absolutely nothing and can contribute nothing of any sense. Now I think I've got enough experience. It's not to do with gender. It's to do with the fact that I'm, nicely old.
Nice, aren't we all? And you're only as good as your last show. I'll let you be the judge of that. I'm done for another day. I won't be with you on Monday. I'm spending it with my family, but you will be in the incredibly capable hands of my LBC colleagues, including Sheila Fogarty, 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 Sheila Fogarty.
Về đâu anh chẳng thu đêm sầu, lòng ta nhung nhớ bao đoạn trường. Từng đêm ta lạnh trong gió sương, nhìn sao ta đêm thương chẳng ngàn.